Okay, if not, then we will move on to our featured speaker for today. Dave Jones. Dave and I go way back. Dave spent nearly a decade in the 1990s as an on-air broadcast meteorologist at NBC4 in Washington, D.C. And he also launched the Glenn Gerber Weather and Climate Summit. This is the national summit that brings together TV meteorologists and scientists to advance TV meteorologists' understanding and communication of extreme weather impacts in climate science. So Dave has been a former president of ESIP, which I'm president of now, and I think Dave was actually the president at the time that we got the education committee established within ESIP. So that goes back to the early 2000s. So Dave has developed this whole new technology that he's going to talk to us today about. And the title of his talk is, Could GeoCollaborate be a resource for climate and environmental learning in this COVID-19 world? So with that, Dave, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tamara. I appreciate that. And thanks, everybody. I hope this next several minutes goes by and is more of an informal sort of engagement, because I'm really just curious to see about how this technology that we developed might be applied in an educational framework, put to work in different ways. And it's so great to see so many friendly faces. Hello, Frank. It's good to see you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to share my screen, and I'm going to go through a couple of PowerPoints first, and then I want to show you GeoCollaborate and how it works, just so we can then open it up and you can say no or yay or this is great, all that sort of stuff, so we can just have a nice conversation. So hopefully, wait a minute, I'm going to stop this just for a second. I think when do you have to like optimize? Yeah, you do, for video clips and computer sound and stuff. Okay, that's great. Now I'm going to share it. And hopefully you can see the full screen presentation now.
Yes.
Okay, so so what I'm going to talk about is how we can advance science by connecting students and schools in a real-time data sharing environment. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. And we're currently working with different federal agencies and things like that to improve their use of data, how they reach decision makers with that data. And so this is kind of a illustration as to how many briefings are done today in, let's say, from NOAA or the Weather Service into decision-making environments, where they have a whole bunch of websites that they want to access. And so this might look familiar to many of you, to have a browser, 50 tabs open on your browser, and you go through that browser, one by one, talking about different data sets and different information. If it's map-based, you're going through different projections of maps, you're going through different interfaces and all that sort of stuff. So I'd like you to think of GeoCollaborate as a way in which we can access all that disparate data from those different sources and pull them together into a visualization, into a map-based visualization where the data sets are what's being displayed. And so you might have, in this map example on the right is COVID numbers in the blue circles by state. And then you might have Weather Service watches, warnings, and advisories that have been issued that are overlaid on that. And then also those green dots in Pennsylvania are rest stops that are open for truckers. So this particular collaborative dashboard is for the movement of fleet utility vehicles across the country, so they can get into disaster areas. And when they drive from state to state to state, they need to know things like what rest stops are open, which ones are closed, where are the concentrations of COVID trending higher or lower, and so where might be a better county they might want to sleep or try to get a hotel. And so essentially what happens is when you're engaging in GeoCollaborate, you have a leader who has credentials that logs in. So this is like in the upper left-hand corner. And then any number of followers that want to follow the movement of the map and the displaying of the data can connect and just turn GeoCollaborate on. So you could have credentials associated with it if you want to, or you can just leave it open and anybody who can connect can follow your collaboration. You still have to connect to a telecom number or a video session like this or however to hear the voice, because GeoCollaborate doesn't do the voice. It could, but currently it doesn't. And then there's also at the bottom a dashboard. And the dashboard is something that you can just leave up and center it wherever you want in the world. And when data sets get updated in that part of the world, then they'll appear in your dashboard. So it doesn't follow the zoom and the movement of the map that the leader moves around, but it does display data sets and they're updated at a specific increment. So when you think of a leader-follower sort of thing, hopefully what's coming to your mind is, oh wow, a student could show some results of an experiment and put them on the maps of his or her partner that they're working on a project with, or maybe a classroom could connect with another classroom at another school somewhere around the country to talk about how they're being impacted by whether it's extreme weather or climate change or local events or things like that. So there's the capability to draw and things like that. I'll show you in just a second. So I put together this video, and I'm going to be quiet because there is audio on it, just to show you how it might work across the country at different schools. So we'll go ahead and play this.
Hi, I'm Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications. I'm just going to do a quick briefing demonstration of GeoCollaborate and how it can be used across the country. If you were a teacher at a school and you wanted to connect with other schools around the country in real time, you could do that using GeoCollaborate. So I have my iPad here, and it's actually reflected in the video right below me. So if I turn my iPad this way, you'll see the display switch, and then if I turn it this way, it'll go back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into an area, let's say the central part of the country. I'll zoom into Oklahoma. Well, you can see all of the other maps around the country also zoom right into Oklahoma. Now, they could be classrooms anywhere. It could be on an Indian reservation. It could be in a private school. It could be in a public school. It could be universities. And so anybody who has the lead can display data sets. So I'll zoom out here again, and I will display a satellite data. So I'm going to turn on some satellite information here, and I'm going to turn on the IR enhanced satellite image. You see it come on in my iPad, and I'll get rid of the menu here, and you see it display on all the other systems around the country. So this is kind of an innovative way. If I want to zoom in to look at these storms in North Texas and in Oklahoma, you'll see that those systems will also follow me in real time. I can do drawings, I can do geospatial messaging, and all that stuff. But I just wanted to show you that with the power of just an iPad, we can connect schools around the country to actually receive the data, receive the information that your school is sending out, and then all the schools can talk about this. We could say, well, school in Seattle, what do you think about these thunderstorms? Do you think that looks like they're going to get severe? Or you could do world geography, or you could do security, you could do politics. Any sort of data you can display on the map, then it will share across the country to any other school that you're connected to in real time. So if I want to turn this satellite picture off, I can just go to my iPad, I'll turn it off, and when it goes off on my iPad, you see it turns off on all the other systems. So this is not screen sharing, it's actual geospatial data sharing across schools. So you could connect one classroom to another in the same school, or individual schools together, perhaps in a STEM teaming environment for some competition. So that's it. I just wanted to give you that brief overview, and we can continue the discussion. Thanks. Hi, I'm Dave Jones with Storm Center
Let's
Communications.
just go
Hi, I'm
past
Dave
that one. There we go. So, so why might this make sense? I'd like to thank Dr. Ellen Prager, who's also on the line here with some of these bullet points. That, you know, educators teaching STEM through inquiry-based learning, they look for real data to use, and that's what GeoCollaborate can do. We can deliver real data, and I'm going to show you this live. I'm going to ask you all to open up a browser in just a minute and go to an address, and I'll show you how this works in real time. So by including geospatial data, it really opens up the doors to all sorts of data discovery, data quality, data checking, validation, verification, correlation with different data sets. And so—
Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Can the followers interact with the data, or are they just watching what the leader's doing?
No, they can interact with it as well. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second.
Okay, great.
As well, yeah. And so whether it's geospatial data, whether it's weather, you know, emergency response, wildfires, things like that, it doesn't have to be weather related either. It can be anything environmental. It can be anything that you want to put on a map. You can share out and get them to interact with. And so geospatial data can be used and explored remotely. So that's really important for virtual learning. I think perhaps now that we're in the age of COVID, maybe this steps up the need for a real-time data sharing kind of platform. And then different forms of geospatial data from different sources can be accessed and shared. So it doesn't have to come from the same portal. It doesn't have to come from any particular location. As long as you trust the data that you're accessing, you can access it and share it to all the followers as well. And so maybe it can be project related. Maybe we can teach collaborative decision making with students. And because when they graduate and they go to college or graduate college, they're going to be having to work together remotely. And this might be a way to accelerate that. This is kind of how it looks from a diagram of devices. So you see all the trusted data sources out in the web. So you can access those data sources, and then on any device, whether it's an iPad, an iPhone, a laptop, things like that, you can connect and receive that data. And then from a sort of a national diagram, you know, Seattle could connect with San Francisco schools, or, you know, more importantly, maybe more urban schools could connect with more rural schools, so they could each learn important information about the jobs that their parents and families do, and things like that. So these stars are just randomly placed. It could be a way to really introduce more advanced technologies just by having a web browser into more disadvantaged school areas. And so what we do here at Storm Center is we work up these things called one-pagers, which are use cases. And so we're supported by NOAA, the NESDIS program, and we help put more satellite data to use in the river ice and flooding areas. So we helped the National Weather Service up in Alaska move quickly to assess a whole bunch of different data sources in the river ice or the ice breakup season. Because when river ice breaks up and moves downstream, it can cause ice jams, and those ice jams cause flooding that backs up into those rivers, into those towns and villages. Can cause a lot of damage. There's mutual assistance, wildfires, you know, railroad response disasters. We've worked up all these one-pagers, and I'm really excited to say, we haven't really announced this publicly, and we probably won't, because we'll just be doing some work behind the scenes. But we're working with the Hurricane Research Division down in Miami with NOAA to get GeoCollaborate into the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, so scientists can share the data between aircraft, never been done before, and can share the data back down to the hurricane researchers and to the National Hurricane Center so they can start to coordinate more effectively with the latest NOAA data that's being collected. That's really exciting. And then, you know, there's government, private sector collaboration. How do you share data between public and private sectors? And so I'm just wondering, you know, I've got this question mark here for, you know, STEM education and all that sort of stuff. Is there, you know, how many use cases, or is there something that, I don't know, maybe the CLEAN group here can work on, or we can identify a use case and, you know, test it out or something. So that's the bulk of my presentation on the PowerPoint. And what I'd like you to do is to open up a browser. So when you're opening up a browser, you can go to this address. You can go to dave.geocollaborate.com, and I'm going to let's see, get out of this PowerPoint just for a second. Hopefully, has everybody gotten to the landing page where you can see leader, follower, or dashboard? If you haven't gotten to that point, let me know and I'll just keep this address up.
Would you mind just putting that in the chat, Dave?
Oh yeah, good point. Good point.
Thank you.
I will do that. Okay. Oops, I forgot the com. I forgot the M, sorry.
It's all good. It looked like Anna beat you to it there.
There you go, thanks. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, so just click on that, you come to the dashboard, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get out of the PowerPoint here, and I'm gonna I'll keep sharing my screen just so you can see the leader. And you'll probably see it behind me as well in my camera. But what I'd like you to do is click follower or follow. And when you click follow, what should load up is a map, and you're probably loading up a map that that looks like maybe this base map.
Mine is just part of the United States, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you can move that map around, right? It's a Esri JavaScript map that you can move around. Now, once you click on, you turn GeoCollaborate on in the upper left-hand corner, then your map will zoom out to match my map, and you will get a data set that I've already loaded. Okay? So now that you are following me, I have control of your map. Okay, so this isn't screen sharing, although I am sharing my screen here in the Zoom session, but in your browser, I'm controlling your map, and I'm looking at California, and the data set that we're seeing is the near surface smoke from the wildfires that are burning right now. And this is the high resolution rapid refresh model, the HER model, that runs every hour out of NOAA Esrel in Boulder. And we're taking that output and sharing it in real time. So if I want to zoom in here and maybe add a geospatial message, and before I do that, let me slow down just for a second. This little arrow on the left-hand side, because I hear some clicking, so I hear some of you trying to investigate some things already. If you open up that menu and you go to base map, you can choose whatever base map you want to display. I'm currently displaying satellite, because if I want to dive down into neighborhoods, then the houses and buildings and all that stuff will resolve. But you can choose National Geographic or oceans or you know, whatever base map you want. And
that explains why you had a dark background over the ocean and I did not.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the way that we use these options, so the cool thing about GeoCollaborate is that some things are collaborative, some things are not. So we found through iterations of testing with collaborating with decision makers, some of them wanted their own maps on there with their own roads and their own critical infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. So they can choose whatever base map they want. They can choose to, then they'll still follow and get my data sets and all that sort of stuff. And so what I want to do is add another data set in here. I'm gonna go up to real-time weather, and I'm gonna turn on the buoys that NOAA has out in the ocean. And you can see some of these off the coast of California. They should have appeared on your system. And now you can inquire on those buoys. You can click on those buoys, whichever ones you want. Some of them will probably have data, some of them may not. And these data are the real-time observations. That's what's happening right now. So what we're doing essentially is we're instructing all of the followers to go to the trusted data source at NOAA to get the data in real time while I control what's turned on and turned off. So if you think about that for a second, we're not bombarding anybody with a whole bunch of internet requests. We're bringing disparate data sets together. So for example, this HER model is coming from Boulder. The buoy data is coming from NOAA's data server. The data source is NODC, and
it's your system, Dave, that's doing
Yeah.
that. You're the one that's making all the requests, correct?
That's right. That's right. And so we're basically instructing your system to go to that source. So that's why you're getting the data and you can inquire it. But we're also, you're also following me. So look, if I zoom out pretty far, look at all the buoy data that's available.
But you just said that you have my system asking for all of this data, but if my system's asking for it, then if everybody else on this call is asking for it, that's multiple requests, isn't it?
It is, but not to any of your devices. It's a multiple request to the data server, right? Okay. So these guys should be able to handle several hundred or 1,000 requests at once, right? It's a enterprise level data server. So if we can also take data and upload it from our system into the Amazon cloud, and that will then get distributed to everybody who's collaborating. So if you had a school that were doing some observations or doing some measurements and they wanted to create an area or show their data, then that would just be uploaded to the cloud, and then everybody would gather that data and download it into their systems automatically.
And how do you have everybody talking to each other? Because you said this doesn't convey sound, the voices.
Right. Right. So you have to connect either on a telecon or through a Zoom or something like that, just like what we're doing here. You don't have to use the video option. You can just talk, or you can have the video option on. What our customers do is they have telecons, and so they're all on, and then some of them hand the leadership off to another participant, and then they access and display data that they're expert on. And then they can, keep handing the leadership over to other organizations.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
When you do this with professionals, disaster risk professionals, people who are really, I imagine there's a lot of instances with the fires that
Yes.
they're dynamically managing things using this kind of platform. Is that the case?
Yes. So, for example, Frank, there's internal collaboration and there's external collaboration that can happen.
Right.
And so the internal collaboration agencies or private sector organizations are using it internally just to coordinate their activities. So they don't publish, or they put this behind a username password. Other users may have a public facing interface, right? So if somebody wants to monitor water quality or harmful algal blooms or things like that, they could use various data sets from NOAA and NASA to monitor that along with their ground stations, their in situ observations, and then create a public dashboard so the public knows what's happening.
The reason I'm asking you,
Yes.
Dave, is you know, this is an old, you're talking into the clean network, right? So, and this should be not surprising to you from your ESIP experience and a lot of other ones, that what's going on in schools across the country in the 15,000 school districts is a whole lot of nothing on this topic. And we've been working on that forever. But the disrespect to our fields, because you know, you go learn about physics, chemistry, biology, and nothing about the Earth system, nothing about the atmosphere, nothing about the ocean, or next to nothing, let alone the climate system. So, and I mean, I just had this morning in an instance at a school where they were like, oh yeah, all this great virtual labs are out there, and we found this Labster program, it's great. And I went in and I looked at it, nothing in the Earth systems at all. No geology, no meteorology, nothing, right? And so you know, we're always an afterthought. And yet the reality is that people deal with this stuff all the time. It's a huge professional field, and there's a lot of jobs in this space, and it plays a critical role in the life of our communities. And that's only going to increase as time goes on. So now I'm off my soapbox for a second. But one of the things I'm wondering is have you ever like either produced or recorded when professionals are talking and acting and interacting with this as an instance, an example of what this is like a job. And this is how professionals work in this space. And this is the kind of the complexities of it. It's not rocks for jocks, not even close. It's about the farthest thing you can get from rocks for jocks. And yet we're still socked in with that legacy and ultimate disrespect. As somebody who's worked at NASA and NOAA for 25 years, I feel that disrespect very personally. So, you know, sorry, there's a whole lot there. It's a nerve. So, but, you know, I mean, I'm just wondering if there's any way to elevate the professionalism that is required in order to do this very complicated work that you're a part of, that would then be able to be imported into a teacher's, you know, experience.
Yeah, I think so, Frank. I mean, that's really a good point. I mean, here's an example, right? I'm moving your maps over into the Pacific, and look, the data from goes east disappears.
Yep.
So I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit, and you see the worldwide buoy network. I'll just turn that off here temporarily, and then show you maybe add another data source. So I'm going to go into my international satellite data, and I'm going to turn on my, let's see here. That one's probably not there because it's dark. I'm turning on Himawari data from Japan.
Right.
Okay. So now you see the Japanese satellite in here. We've gone over into the Japanese satellite, and oh, look, there's a monster typhoon that just hit past south of Okinawa yesterday, and now it's heading up and towards Japan, and they're real concerned about this. So, so we can show pretty easily now how to access all this really cool science data and information, and there could be, you know, stuff from the Climate Prediction Center, it could be NCEI, could be, you know, any sort of data that we want to put together. Displayed, and I'll change the transparency of this satellite image so it shows up a little bit better, so you can now see this typhoon happening. And you know, with this, I'm really happy that we're having this discussion, because I've been asked a couple times by Marshall Shepard down at University of Georgia if I could present to his class, his intro to science class. It's a requirement for all incoming freshmen. And last year I used GeoCollaborate. So we had a video, and I used GeoCollaborate. And he said that all the kids were paying attention, and they were all looking at it, and they were able to pull it up on their device. And so once I had control of what they were seeing, it almost, I don't know if it turned into a video game or not, but it almost turned into like something was on their device. So that really meant a lot to them. And I was moving around showing different weather happenings and things like that. So Marshall asked me to do it again this year. We'll do it in October or whatever. And it's just, you know, other suggestions of people saying, have you tried this in the classroom? Have you done this? Have you done? No.
Okay, one question I have. So how good does the internet connection have to be for somebody to be a follower?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When we designed GeoCollaborate, we designed it with emergency management in the beginning. So as you know, when disasters happen, bandwidth is really lacking on the ground in disaster areas. And so we designed it to survive little to no bandwidth. And when I say that, I mean, you know, if you're somewhere like, let's say, southern Louisiana right now, and you want to get some information, we can share that information. And if the bandwidth is bad, you may not even gotten the command to get the data. But once you connect, it will go and look for that command and go get the data when the bandwidth is available and able to download stuff. So
the reason I ask is that all of my students are going to be remote, and they're going to be working on teams. And so
yeah.
they could all be able to, but some of them are on campus, but some of them are at home. And some of those homes I have one student from Taiwan who is in Taiwan, and one in Indonesia, and one in India.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know what their internet connections are like.
Right. Yeah, we did an example where we had 65 people in different parts of the world, and we're collaborating, and it included China, Australia, New Zealand, India, where we were moving the map around and displaying data. Some of them were delayed, but they did get the data, and they did move to where I was talking about. So I think, you know, a lot of places it's going to be trial and error if the bandwidth is an issue. But you can always, at any time, if you don't get something that I send, you can always reload your browser. You just click the reload button, turn GeoCollaborate back on, and it will download everything that that was shared. And just a point technically about what's happening is that we access data services because data services in a REST format are formatted in such a way that you're only getting the data requests from the domain of my screen. So I just zoomed into North Dakota and Minnesota. I made a call back to the servers for the higher resolution satellite data, but only in the window that my map is displaying. So we didn't get any other data outside of this domain. And so it really minimizes the use of bandwidth so you can deliver the science information into this area. And
do you have any data so I'm clicking here and I can't pull up any information. What is it that defines whether or not there's information that I could
it shows up. It shows up. So what I'm going to do here is let me do something. I'm going to draw. I can draw something as well. So let me just do a collaborative draw and do a. And I'm going to say, hello, clean. This is a special climate message. Okay, so, and I'm going to make it red. And I'm going to draw a polygon just, like north of Minot, North Dakota, over to the top of North Dakota. So I just drew a polygon, and you should see that red polygon on your systems now. And you can click on that polygon.
Okay.
So what this means is that now we can do some science inquiry based on observations that we might share or things that we might make clickable, for observations. And then you can add geospatial messages in there saying, this is really interesting what's going on in this part of the country, or, what are you guys in Seattle seeing? And so the real thing that I think, I'm not an education expert, but the real exciting part for me is that you can get people in different locations looking at the same data and starting to learn how to collaborate together to improve and discover collaborative decision making. So,
Dave, a question on that?
Can I? Oh.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, a question on that. So in having, I think the big strength of your program is encouraging and having a system where different schools can collaborate with each other, connection. That is very sought after. That is a great tool. How do the students, how do the schools find each other? How do they say, okay, we're in location A, we're looking for someone who's doing something similar in somewhere. Where do they find each other so that they, they're not just, well, we're working on this and you're working on that, so we're not really interested in each other. We have students who are already starting their Earth Sciences labs on climate and weather, already for this school year. They are in it. They're using NOAA data and doing ground verification. They are doing studies on it. They want to connect with other students. If they can do it in support of your program, I think that's wonderful. They're finding other ways. We're finding schools where there is science labs going on and doing those connections. It's when students see each other doing it and helping each other, they get excited. This is something real. So I'm not. How do we say where else is there something else similar going on that we can set up that Zoom call and use your program?
No, that's a great question, and just from somebody who has periodically been exposed to clean. I mean, what hits me in the first and foremost is, boy, that could be a nice service that clean provides, or have some sort of opportunity to say, here's what's going on, and just launch GeoCollaborate to start sharing and accessing data. I mean, you have to think through some of these steps, but discovery is always a challenge. But if you can be that unique organization that is saying, look, we're about to launch science discovery and data access opportunities, so come to Clean, search, and identify what schools you can connect with, could be one of the ways in which you start to discover, because I think the Clean network is so large now that it's, you would be touching on a lot of educators across the country, I would think.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in, I think that's a great point, Dave, and Jim, in terms of how to connect people. And I think, to some extent we have, within the Clean network, a lot of different folks. We do have educators, but a lot of informal educators and a lot of other folks that may find this useful as well. So I think Clean's going to be a great place to sort of collaborate and maybe find those kinds of connections and collaborations. I definitely agree. I would also argue, I think that you have a lot of promise here, or just this is such a cool tool. I'm so excited about it. And I have so many thoughts around how it could be, used in all these different contexts. I have some experience in informal settings, and I can see how it could be used, in a public lecture, sort of as an outreach tool, that a science could have folks, playing around with data along with them as they're talking to them or whatever, but in the educational context, especially now as things are moving more virtual environments and needing these kinds of connections, I could see this being a really powerful tool to let kids, virtual learning environments or in classrooms, be able to access real scientific data. That's one of the things that Clean, tries to promote, is resources that have students working with and looking at real scientific data. And this is a nice way to let them play, but also you control a lot of it and can show things, right, and help them. So, but I do think that there's a lot of opportunity here for, and I don't know, where funding or this kind of collaboration would come from, but this would be my suggestion, is to sort of collaborate with an education group or curriculum developer, something like that, that could create some things that could help students and teachers use this easy, walk through an activity where it's here's how you can do it, but I still think really great and powerful in other ways as well, like I was saying, as an outreach tool and so many different other things. So yeah, I think either through Clean or other educational collaborations. Like, I think there's so much that can be done with this, and I'm super excited about it. And I just want to.
Oh, well, thanks, Katie. I think, you know, one of the neat things is well, first of all, we're not working with educators right now. This is really just kind of you're seeing it for the first time in an education kind of framework. We are using it, you know, obviously a lot. Federal agencies are licensing it. And the really cool thing is that we developed this under the Small Business Innovation Research Program from the federal government. So because we've gone through years and years and years of passing through these gates in this process, we've now reached phase 3 of the SBIR status, which means now we're sole source status with every federal agency in the US government. So now any agency can immediately get it and move on with it and start using it with no further competition, which is awesome. But it doesn't really impact, I mean, I don't think it impacts really the education side of things unless Department of Education, you know, came and said, hey, we are funding you to roll this out, work with these teachers, work with Clean, work, you know, that's a possibility that could happen to get this out and about rapidly. But I really just am exposing you to it just to kind of make this a brainstorming session to say, wow, you know, what can we do to maybe expose some schools to this initially and roll it out, or, you know, and I'm definitely thinking in partnership with Clean and, you know, others that have a real mission to get more science data in front of kids, because I think I share your passion too. I just don't live that every day and not being able to deliver data to kids, but I see it on the professional side where we have decision makers all over the place that are trying to make decisions, and guess where they get the information? Facebook, or, you know, some other location that the data is not trusted. And so we're working very hard to make the data sets that we present to decision makers as trusted data sets. And we're doing a lot of that work through the ESIP Federation. I'm the co-chair of the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster too. So this is a great conversation. Katie, I appreciate your comments.
So Dave, there's a question in the chat from Anna Gold. She said, Dave, fantastic tool. How long does a project stay within the system? If a project's been set up, like the data's been loaded, polygons added, can the same project be used again or shared with others to facilitate?
Yeah, so that's a great question too, because we're getting the same questions, similar questions from some of our federal customers where they would like to save events and go back and use those events for training. And
well, I would actually think even in the educational context, a teacher might want to do this over multiple classes as they maybe sequentially bring in more and more data as they have their students sort of think more expansively about systems to be able to start from where you left off the last time.
Yeah, no, I got it. That's really, no, that's a great question. So while currently we don't save the data or the session, it doesn't mean we can't. So the way the SBIR program kind of funnels you through this process is everything you do in your innovation, which has to be a new invention, can't be done anywhere else. So when we got to phase 3, we had this capability, but the other cool thing is that it's ready to be expanded, integrated. GeoCollaborate can be integrated into other mapping environments to make them collaborative. So there's all sorts of directions that we can go. But the whole idea that you just asked about saving things and building upon them, we can certainly do it. We haven't integrated it into the technology as of yet, but we do a lot of thinking at Storm Center, and it's on the list of something to do.
And I would just encourage you to consider that option, because I agree. I think that's going to be a key for moving into the educational context of being able to pull up things over and over and show it multiple times.
Because teachers will want to use it in multiple years. And
right. Well,
actually,
think about this.
Also think about phasing it, being able to bring in bits at a time that you've saved before, not bringing in the whole thing.
And think about this too. Like, let's just use NOAA as an example. If you're pulling in data, GeoCollaborate is not storing and saving this information. We're pulling it from trusted sources. So if the data was saved anywhere else at any agency or location, It's always going to be available for you to pull back in. So, what I was talking about is, a particular scenario where you're pulling in all this disparate data and you want to take that particular scenario and save it and say, oh, this was Hurricane Laura. Let's pull up Hurricane Laura's data sets, and then it automatically does that. But the data sets that we went to get during Hurricane Laura, if they're saved, are always going to be there. You know what I mean?
Hey, Dave, and given that Tamara, you're on, and Dave, you're on, one of the areas where I'm thinking there might be some synergy is, Tamara, the Earth Labs project that you led.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what teachers need, I mean, this is an amazing platform, Dave, but the support architecture around that for an educator is no trivial task. And what I'm thinking is that, Earth Labs proved its value hands down, but it's the ongoingness of that project and the kind of some of the underlying tools that you use, Tamara, those tools aren't available anymore. Some of the labs, used a certain way of doing it, and now that's not available anymore. So you'd have to redesign the labs. But a lot of the architecture and which labs you added. I'm just wondering, Tamara, if you've thought about resubmitting Earth Labs as a next phase when NSF is, or climate related or earth related education becomes more of a priority that could happen fairly soon. If it does, it would be a logical partnership.
Yeah, no, actually, so that actually is a really good idea. I mean, the other way you could go is the Earth Exploration Toolbook framework. That also is old, but it would actually it would be much easier, I think, to do an Earth Exploration Toolbook chapter and then sequence them together into an Earth Labs module. I mean, they're very much synergistic kinds of resources.
Sure.
I think Dave, that this is really an interesting kind of thing to try to explore using those frameworks. And maybe, so now Clean is a member of ESIP, but I think I'd like to expand what the Education Committee does in terms of collaborating with other clusters. And so your work would be a natural connection that we could try to explore there.
Sure. That sounds awesome.
The reason I raised that point was because there was a curriculum specialist, a school district somewhere or a state who got their hands on Earth Labs, and they were just absolutely raving. They didn't know I knew anything about it. They were just raving. And so
I think to some extent Turk keeps that up. So to some extent. So Turk doesn't tend to follow up in terms of maintaining resources. I no longer work at Turk.
I know.
And it's technically their property. Now, given that, I'm sure I could talk to them about if we wanted to go that route. I mean, we can explore those possibilities.
And I'll just throw in that I think that's another reason I'm kind of excited about Dave's tool here, is because it seems a little more robust than some of the things teachers sometimes work with and then they go away. And because it's pulling in its own data, as long as sort of the Esri mapping system doesn't go away, which that's been pretty stable over time. I think this is pretty robust, which is nice, because I think teachers deal with that a lot, where you find something you like and then the tool goes away. So this is really nice for that.
Well, and one of the other things that I just wanted to mention quickly is you can probably see in my screen share. Oh, no, it doesn't look like you can. There's maybe I can fix that real quick. There's an option at the top of the menu bar that says InstaShare. Here, I'm going to just change there. So I'm just widening out my view here, and I'll change my base map just so you can see it a little easier. This button called InstaShare allows anybody who is connected. So say you have different schools connected. One school could bring in the data from another school into their instance to see what they're looking at. So rather than looking at the same instance where they're looking at things, one school could say, well, let's see what North Dakota is looking at right now. and they could pull an InstaShare. The menu would come down and it would say North Dakota High School or what, Minot or whatever, and then that data would come in.
But I thought you said that everybody's looking at the same data.
Well, they are if they're sharing the same instance. This InstaShare allows multiple instances of GeoCollaborate to pull in each other's data. So
does there have to be a leader like you? I mean, who gets to find the leader?
The students would be a leader, or the teacher, would be the leader. It's anybody who wants to access and display data. And then what I would think
is that a heavy lift for like a student to do to take on your role in this particular setting?
No, they turn it on and they start displaying data sets. That's
how do they find it? How do they know where the data sets are? Like,
oh,
you pulled up this data for us, but
so in a collaboration session, you could identify data sets and just put them into GeoCollaborate, and they're always there. Those data links are always there. And then once you pull them up as a leader, they display and share across everybody's platform.
So that part gets saved.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All that gets saved. As a matter of fact,
you could say, so if you were working with somebody and you wanted to create a curriculum, you could say this instance of GeoCollaborate will have these data sets, and then every time you pull up that instance, that'll all be there.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, and so like in my menu, you can see on my screen share a little bit the side of the menu there, where these are collaboration data sets that I've identified. So there's real-time weather, domestic satellite imagery, private sector, St. Tammany Parish in Louisiana. This is my instance, so I have a lot of test data sets in here. The tail Doppler radar data from the NOAA P3 aircraft. But there's also things like if you want to do climate resilience, if you want to do, Frank, this is one of the things that I've always thought would be awesome with a GeoCollaborate, and that is take things like the Sea Level Rise Toolkit or the climate, climate.gov, things like that. Take those data sets and just identify their sources or make a GeoCollaborate export where they can come right in, and all of a sudden you can give a briefing to 10,000 people along the southeast coast, and they're actually able to click on their properties and click on things like that. You're just putting the data in front.
Dave, you got to talk to Dave Herring and have that conversation, especially Ned Gardner. Awesome work, Dave. Unfortunately, I got to jump to the Clean Leadership Board meeting.
Oh gosh,
is that on the same line?
It is, because I hung up and came back and I'm in the same room.
It is in this room, so we will have to transition to that.
Okay.
Oh, my mic
Thank you,
is
everybody.
Okay, so Dave, I do want to talk to you also about various things with respect to this, so we should talk offline.
Okay, that sounds great.
I just want to address this strain in the chat and just maybe have you put it into the recording so it's there, Dave. What's the cost structure for schools?
Well, we don't have a cost structure for schools because we don't work with school. We would take input from the Clean Network, right? What do you guys think? What makes it affordable? How could it work? We have a professional, set, which obviously isn't going to apply to the educators. But again, this is the first exposure in a formal kind of education area that we're making. And we just, it's like, let's talk. Let's make this a discussion, a conversation to see how it can work.
Yeah, and I unfortunately we do have to transition this to the Clean Leadership Board meeting call,
Sure.
so we get the full time on that. But I would encourage, if anyone has any thoughts for Dave, to maybe Dave, you want to put your email in the chat and people can email.
Oh, sure.
Continue the discussion.
Katie, could you capture the chat and that get posted with the recording?
I just saved the chat, and I can do it once more once Dave puts his in there, so we get the full thing. But it should save automatically as well. So yes,
Okay.
we can post that as well. And yeah, and we can, Dave, also the other option would be to start a thread on the Clean email list, and folks can just respond on there or something like that. So
It could be a nice innovation that Clean brings to the forefront, because we don't, right now we're a small business and we want to just put this out there because we know that with COVID, there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen. And this screen sharing stuff just, you know, I mean, it's just quite not there, I don't think. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks a lot. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so long.
Thank you.